So collective security, particularly in the hands of NATO, originally against the Warsaw Pact, but it doesn't exist anymore. Thank goodness. And it kept peace in Europe. Maybe it's not as effective as the concert of Europe, which I wish more of you would have talked about, discussing your summaries, because World War I ended that 99-year period of peace. Why do you think Europeans produced all that great literature in the 19th century? Because they weren't killing one another. But it has maintained the peace. Of course, Germany and France and them are all now allies of one another. I served for a while in Germany, plotting out cities in Bulgaria to nuke in case of a war. A pleasant task. But at least I learned Bulgarian geography. Well, we used to have a large group of Bulgarian students at Delphi. I used to tell them if their city was on my list for tactical nuclear weapon strikes to stop Soviet tank attack. And how effective NATO has been in Afghanistan, that's still an open question. I mean, the use of NATO in Afghanistan is a bit of a stretch, but it's being done. Not in Iraq. That's not a NATO operation, since Iraq never did anything to us. So why do we attack it? Oh, what the hell? Let's just attack another country. And install democracy. Oh boy, that's worked well. Again, we'll talk more about that next week. Lawrence of Arabia warned us. So it has been very effective, at least in Europe's case. It didn't stop the Vietnam War, didn't stop the Korean War, but it has stopped wars in Europe. And remember, the most destructive wars in the history, really, going back to the 30 Years' War, was in Europe. Now, the second major after effect of World War II was, of course, that invention, the gadget, our term for the nuclear bomb. And there's a video required to watch how it was done. It wasn't easy, very costly, and many people thought it couldn't be done. Indeed, even when the pilots of the plane, the B-29, which was named after the pilot's mother, dropping her load on Hiroshima, they were convinced it wouldn't work, but it did. And as that video, the second one, shows, you don't ever want to see that happen again. Nuclear weapons really changed the whole nature of war, especially after, contrary to our expectations, the Soviet Union, which had a large number of physicists, and they knew what they were doing, and a lot of uranium to convert, blew their own bomb in 1954, and China used it in its own 1960s. It became evident that really the only way to stop war was through something called MAD, mutual assured destruction, that with bombers and missiles that each side had, if one side attacked first, it would be destroyed and vice versa. So no matter how many bombers and missiles we lost, we'd have enough to wreak havoc on the Soviet Union, particularly from missile submarines that you really are almost impossible to find, theirs and ours. So mutual assured destruction prevented war, particularly in 1962 when it almost broke out over the Cuban Missile Crisis. Good thing Kennedy made the decisions that he did. Otherwise, folks, you wouldn't have to worry about doing this work because you never would have been born. If he had acted impulsively, just think of what would have happened, but he didn't. He kept us cool. I wish all politicians could do that. And not get too emotional. Emotions are good for love. They're not good for politics. And because of mutual assured destruction, because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, we agreed to limit the testing and eliminate the testing of nuclear weapons both above ground and below. Above ground because of what it did to the atmosphere and the dropping of radioactivity on grass, meaning as a kid I could rarely drink milk, which is why I have a low cholesterol level. One of the good points. And then the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement, which said that still got this head cold. We, the nuclear powers, would not provide information or technology to other countries to develop nuclear weapons, which we have not done. The Soviets have not done. The Chinese may have with Pakistan. And that other countries would agree not to develop nuclear weapons. Now, most countries have done that. There's no Latin American country that has nuclear weapons, and they've agreed not to. Africa has agreed not to. South Africa gave up its nuclear program. And Southeast Asia has a nuclear-free zone. Only the United States, Soviet Union, Britain, France, China, North Korea, which is a problem, India and Pakistan, and Israel, which is not a signatory to the NPT, Iran is, we'll talk more about that later, have nuclear weapons. And the NPT has worked very well. North Korea used to be part of it until a certain president named Bush, the second, not the first, began calling them names and other things. And then you had the father died, and the son died, and now you got this nutcase there. So it's not completely solved, but it's been, certainly better than a world with hundreds of countries having nuclear weapons. The third impact of World War II was to have an exception to the Westphalian idea of absolute sovereignty of nations. That nations could decide totally what went on inside their borders. If you want to have the death penalty, you can have the death penalty. We do. If you want to put down a rebellion, you can do it. We did it with the South. Teaching my ancestors that it was a stupid idea to take on the North, which it was. And just about everything, except one thing: you cannot commit genocide. And the Holocaust, and I have a short video on that, when soldiers come into one of the camps. Not easy to watch. My father did that, folks. He never talked about it. He never talked about it. Under the International Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, put together by Eleanor Roosevelt, who, like certain female politicians these days, was attacked every day, but she went on to do her work. Don't worry about people criticizing you folks. Ignore them, I do. And I get criticized tremendously at a certain university, but we won't name it here. I could care less. All I care about is what my wife thinks of me. Well, most of them. So, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you can take a look at it online if you'd like. Limited sovereignty. A country could not commit genocide within its midst. The way the Germans had done with not just Jews, but gypsies, and by the way, homosexuals. So if you know someone who hates homosexuals, who has homophobia, point out that they agree with none other than Adolf Hitler. Although he's not the only one, but nobody else killed him as far as I know. And now, of course, the question is, when is the country committing genocide? We argued that Sudan was doing that in Darfur. Others on the Security Council, named China, said no, it was just a civil war, it wasn't genocide. So the UN could not intervene, and it did not. Genocide did obviously occur in Rwanda, but nobody had a stomach to intervene. So they paid for it. But those are the three major changes. And they affect us today. Collective security, which is still there with NATO and Europe. And we made it very clear to Russia, you touch a NATO country, and you know what it means. An attack on one is an attack on all. That's the essence of collective security. In the UN, but they don't have the army to back it up, nor the tactical nukes that are spread throughout Europe. And the nuclear weapon and the problem of controlling it, which was done through a policy of MAD, but also the NPT, the Nuclear Proliferation Agreement Treaty. Although not everybody has signed it, I wish everybody would, particularly countries that are our allies. And limited sovereignty, that genocide could no longer be carried out, that countries did have a right to intervene to stop it. Alright, watch these, summarize it, make reference to the videos, folks. Just don't give me general stuff. Your summaries are too general, or too detailed. You're at both sides of the problem, either too detailed or too general. Try to go in the middle. I'll give you more advice on that later.